Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's weather update. So, our Christmas storm is really starting to get its act together, and we are seeing snow from Montana through Wyoming into Colorado as of 3:11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time this evening. Looking at the 18Z run of the North American model, as we go through the evening into the overnight, snow is going to increase in coverage and intensity across Wyoming into Colorado, with rain spreading across Texas through the Great Plains all the way up to the Dakotas and Minnesota. And then as we go into tomorrow morning, could be seeing a line of severe storms moving across West Texas, heavy rain across East Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, into the northern plains, and heavy snow moving into Nebraska, Colorado, the western Dakotas, as well as some sleet and freezing rain. And then, as we're going into about 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, our storm will center itself across the south central plains, with storms continuing to move across the plains in the south, snow really spreading from Nebraska through the Dakotas into northwestern Minnesota as we go through the day tomorrow. And then as we go into tomorrow afternoon, about 4 o'clock Central Time, 5 o'clock Eastern Time, heavy rain is going to extend from the Gulf Coast all the way through the Minnesota-Canadian border in the green. Snow continuing across the northern plains. Going into Monday now, our storm system will begin to intensify across Missouri and Arkansas, with rain across the south into the Midwest, and freezing rain across portions of Iowa, snow re-entering into Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota as we go into 7 a.m. Central Time. Christmas morning, very heavy snow across Nebraska into southeast Minnesota, and there's going to be this band of freezing rain setting up as well, and heavy rain from the south through the Tennessee Valley into the Midwest. Going through the day Monday, this storm will continue to slow down and nearly stall across Iowa, going to 4 o'clock Monday, Christmas afternoon, 4 o'clock Central Time. Rain across from Florida through the southeast into the Ohio Valley, into the western Great Lakes. Freezing rain across Minnesota. Heavy snow will park itself across Nebraska and South Dakota all day Monday. Going into Tuesday as well, this storm will pretty much stall out, and we're going to be seeing about 24 hours of snow across portions of the northern plains all the way through Tuesday morning, as well as freezing rain. So this is going to lead to some very heavy snowfall accumulations. Our snowfall accumulation totals have increased dramatically since yesterday's update. Still looking at an additional 2 to 10 inches of snow across the Rockies of Wyoming and Colorado, but focusing in on Nebraska, the South Dakota, we are now expecting a wide swath, especially in eastern Nebraska, southeastern South Dakota, of 1 to 2 feet of snow from our Christmas storm, with a lot of it coming the day after Christmas. So this is going to be a significant snowstorm for these areas. So make sure you're really preparing for a heavy snowstorm Christmas Day and the day after Christmas across central eastern Nebraska, central southeastern South Dakota, with about 2 to 8 inches in eastern North Dakota, far western Minnesota as well. What's really concerning me are the potential ice accumulations. First of all, we're looking at about a tenth to a quarter of an inch of ice accumulation across portions of Washington State and Oregon, but with our Christmas Day and day after Christmas storm, we could be seeing a major ice storm across portions of Minnesota and the western Iowa and the eastern Dakotas. I mean, this North American model is getting a little bit excited and overdoing the ice accumulations, giving over an inch in some areas of Iowa and Minnesota. But I wouldn't be surprised if several areas across Minnesota, especially western Iowa, see a good quarter to half an inch of ice accumulation, which would lead to some power outages and widespread tree damage if this were to happen. So make sure you're really preparing for a potential ice storm if you live across especially western Iowa, the eastern Dakotas, and much of Minnesota as we go into Christmas Day and the day after Christmas. Now, looking at rainfall accumulations in the North American model, more storms will pound the Pacific Northwest over the next 3 days, bringing a good 3 to 5 inches to coastal Oregon and Washington. But looking at our Christmas storm, going to see a good 2 to 4 inches of rain from north central Texas through east central Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, into Iowa and Nebraska. This is going to be snowfall equivalent up to Minnesota, and then along the into the south from Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, the western Carolinas. A good 1 to 3 inches of rain. We're going to be seeing pockets up to 6 inches in isolated locations across Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Smoky Mountains of the Carolinas. Could be leading to some flooding issues due to this heavy rainfall. Now, taking a look at the National Weather Service's watches, warnings, and advisories map, widespread winter weather advisories are in effect across Wyoming into central Colorado, eastern Colorado, central western Nebraska, south central South Dakota, western New Mexico, far eastern Utah, far southern Montana in the purples. Then we got winter storm warnings in some of the mountainous areas of eastern Arizona, northern New Mexico, far southern Colorado in the pinks. And then we have winter storm watches in effect for southeastern Colorado, central Nebraska, central southern South Dakota in the blues in preparation for this winter storm, and dense fog advisories across Lake Michigan, much of Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, northeastern Minnesota, and Maricopa County, Arizona, and a severe thunderstorm warning in eastern New Mexico. So taking a look at our excessive flooding rainfall outlook for today, a slight risk of excessive flooding rainfall is in place across the Texas Gulf Coast from Corpus Christi through Houston through Beaumont in the yellow. Then we have another slight risk of flooding from the northern Texas Hill Country through the Dallas-Fort Worth area, south central Oklahoma in the yellow. A large marginal risk of flooding in the green, including Austin, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and Wichita, Kansas. Make sure you're preparing for flooding, especially in the Texas coastal areas and in the DFW area for today, especially through tonight and tomorrow morning. Going into tomorrow, our slight risk of flooding spreads or moves to southeast Louisiana, far southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, far western Florida from New Orleans through Pensacola, and another slight risk for eastern Oklahoma, Kansas, western Missouri, Arkansas in the yellow, marginal risk for a large area in the dark green as well for tomorrow. And then flooding threat will dramatically decrease as we go into Monday. Just a marginal risk across portions of the Florida Panhandle through Georgia and the Carolinas. And then going into Tuesday, marginal risk up the East Coast, the Carolinas, Virginia, into Maryland, southern Pennsylvania. And then as we go into Wednesday, our storm will slowly move up the East Coast, bringing a marginal risk to portions of southeastern New England for next Wednesday. And as if all this wasn't enough, we have a slight risk of severe weather for this evening and overnight across western Texas, including Fort Stockton, Midland in the yellow, with a marginal risk of severe weather in the dark green, extending into eastern New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle for tonight. And this includes an isolated tornado threat, a 2% chance of tornadoes touching down within 25 miles of location for Fort Stockton, Midland, and Lubbock, Texas. Make sure you're preparing for an isolated tornado spin-up if you live in these areas tonight. Damaging wind threat is at 15% for Midland and Fort Stockton, 5% in Amarillo, Lubbock, and Abilene. And then large hail is also at 15% for Midland, Fort Stockton, 5% for Amarillo and Lubbock for quarter-size hail within 25 miles of a location. So this is going to be a long-lasting, wide impact storm, bringing flooding, heavy snow, and an ice storm and severe weather to many areas of the country over the next 3 to 4 days. So make sure you're preparing for this storm if you live across much of the country. Thanks for watching this evening's update. Please stay safe. Have a Merry Christmas, my friends.